As some of you may know, for a few weeks every year, I do a bit of exam invigilation up at the grammar school. And when everyone is settled and the exam underway, I often take a look at the exam paper, not understanding most of what I am reading. Anyway, one of the exams I was responsible for this year was the GCSE English paper on functional writing and reading non-fiction. Interesting, that particular paper. Did you do that this year? Yes, right, yes. Interesting, that exam was quite prominent in the news this week, and that was nothing to do with me. But one of the sections of this exam paper was to analyse and comment on an extract from an article titled "Why I Hate Fashion." Why I hate fashion. Listen to this. Tanya Gold writes that designer clothes don't make you beautiful. High heels are painful and can even be fatal. A confession. It's been stalking me for years now. Fashion is not a friend, but an enemy. The older I am, the more annoyed I am with what is meant to make us beautiful. Now I believe it's one of the ultimate evils in the universe, along with yogurt. It should have its own Death Star. Put simply, I hate fashion. I scowl at look. I snarl at brassiere. I spit at Vogue. Sometimes I tear them up, these glossy pages full of anorexic children, part human, part makeup, part computer program, just because I am worth it. You may say that I am bitter. How is my social life, you ask? What is my weight? What has happened to make me reject the things we are supposed to love? And don't forget shoes. Surely I love shoes. No, I must be ill. I'm an outcast. Not at all. I am a reasonably normal person. I like food and friends and comfort. It is just that I cannot ignore the fashion silliness anymore. I walk past the shop that sells 6-inch heels and I am angry. Topshop, angry again. All those adverts for this season's must-have. Don't even go there. I've had it with the giant faces and figures of overpaid skinny actors telling me what I should buy from every billboard and magazine and TV screen. I decided to write this piece last year when I read that a 16-year-old girl wearing high-heeled shoes had fallen between the carriages of a train. She died, of course. It was snowing that night. But still, this young woman, with a lifetime of fashion choices before her, ran along that platform and is now dead. And I couldn't help suspecting that had she been wearing a shoe designed for actually walking rather than for fashion, she would be alive. This was different from the usual fashion of death, where a model has a heart attack on the catwalk because she lives on grapes. This was an ordinary girl, a bystander. And why was she wearing high-heeled shoes on an icy night? Because fashion, the whispering monster, told her to. I thought about that young woman for days. I couldn't forget her. Why? Because I realized that fashion has hounded me. It has followed me around like an eternal schoolyard bully, throwing self-doubt and rubbish into my path. If you are a young woman, it's the backing track to your life. It's never enough to wear a clean dress and comfortable shoes and be done. Fashion is what you need. This will make you beautiful. This will make you popular. Wear this, wear that. I can look at the clothes on the catwalk now and laugh at their dampness. They are not for me. I still think about that young woman on the train tracks though. What did she pay for her shoes? Well, how's that for getting over it? Even getting out of it. I would suggest not just young people sitting an English exam, but this is something each of us would do well to analyse for ourselves. And perhaps what we will consider this evening in the will of God will be a big and safe step to doing that. So please join me again in God's book, the Bible, and Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and getting over it from the muddle to the middle. From the muddle to the middle. We understand that the muddle is a messy place of chaos and confusion, of disorder and leading to disaster. I suggest to you that the middle is a safer and better place, because to find the middle is to be rightly centered. The middle in this context is not about compromise, but about constancy. It's the place of balance, and it leads because it allows balance and boundary and blessing. Getting over it from the muddle to the middle. How we need to get there? Well, let's read Ecclesiastes chapter 2, beginning to read from verse 1. Let's stand, please, in honor of the reading of God's word. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. I thought in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is due. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is foolish, and what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheating myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit and fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of man. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. Then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise man has eyes in his head, while the fool walks in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I thought in my heart, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said in my heart, this too is meaningless. For the wise man, like the fool, will not be long remembered. In days to come, both will be forgotten. Like the fool, the wise man too must die. So I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool, yet he will have control over all the work into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all he owns to someone who has not worked for it. This too is meaningless, and a great misfortune. What does a man get for all the toil and anxious striving with which he labors under the sun? All his days his work is pain and grief. Even at night his mind does not rest. This too is meaningless. A man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This too I see is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the man who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Amen. You may be seated. How true. You can live on plain, simple, tasteless food so as to avoid an ulcer. Drink no tea or coffee or other stimulants in the name of health. Go to bed early. Stay away from nightlife. Avoid all controversial subjects so as never to give offense. Mind your own business and avoid involvement in other people's problems. You can spend money only on necessities and save all you can. You can take all these precautions and yet you can still break your neck in the bathtub and it will serve you right. the muddle of unrestrained pleasure. The muddle of unrestrained pleasure. Look at verse 1. I thought in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good, but that also proved to be meaningless. Verse 10. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired, I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. He sought with pleasure to find out what is good. And he ended up with that which is bad. Everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. And many have gone down the same road. Well-intentioned, seeking with pleasure to find out what is good, but yet ending up with that which is bad. This may take some of you back. I hope the tune doesn't stick in your mind. Well, not for the rest of the sermon. Don't mind if you can't get sleep because of it. Good morning, miss. Can I help you, son? 16 today and up for fun. I'm a big boy now, or so they say. So if you'll serve, I'll be on my way. Welcome to the house of fun. Now I've come of age. Welcome to the house of fun. Welcome to the lion's den. Temptations on his way. Welcome to the house of fun. For the uninitiated, how appropriate that these lyrics should be sung by a group called Mass. I deny myself nothing my eyes desire. I refuse my heart no pleasure, getting over the muddle of unrestrained pleasure. Folks, we live in a world gone mad with fun. A world that is overloaded with shallow entertainment, overguarded on self-indulgence, overtaken by unrestraint. And this kind of pleasure-seeking is called hedonism. There's an actual name for it. Hedonism. Hedonism is the view that pleasure is the greatest good and that pleasure should be the standard in deciding which course of action to pursue. If it feels good, do it. Go for it. I have a right to be happy. How do you know unless and until you give it a try? And for many, once they have, they are hooked. Or worse. We live in a world that has gone mad with fun, a world that is overloaded with shallow entertainment, overguarded on self-indulgence, overtaken by unrestraint. You see, we have bought into the lie that limitless fame brings limitless freedom. That abundant riches and possessions bring endless happiness and health. That security on one level provides protection and insurance on all levels. For example, how many think that happiness is found in the pleasure of humour? Life is just one big laugh to them. A joke. They take absolutely nothing seriously. I have long since discovered, to my own personal shame and cost, that you can tell a lot about a person not only in what they cry over, but what they laugh at. And how quickly they can go from one to the other. Here's how we do it in the West. We sit with our TV dinners and have our entertainment interrupted by images of starving children, rarely stopping to miss a mouthful as we carry on. Doesn't it trouble us how easily we can turn from tragedy to trivia? At what no longer troubles us, at what we no longer blush over. How we can be moved equally by a silly soap opera as we are over a starving child or a lost soul. And it's not just the world outside, it's the church inside. Laura, age 9, unknowingly spoke for many older ones who should know better when she wrote, "Dear Pastor, I think that a lot more people would come to your church if you made it more like Disneyland." You see, the big question in church today is not, is everybody holy? It's, is everybody happy? From both their dress, which is scanty, to their performance, many worship groups are no different from a pagan pop group taking the lead from the X Factor and the like. How many pastors have become court jesters, silly clowns, juggling church balls, jumping through congregational hoops, trying to keep everybody happy? Oh, I wonder what the pastor's going to come up with this week to amuse us. Preachers have now become comics, known for their jokes and wit, with no one remembering their message because they have sold out to the masses and have nothing significant and serious to say worth remembering. But let me tell you, folks, when life falls apart on you on Monday morning, humour will not be your helper, nor your hero. How true. Often it can be the loud laugh that reveals the vacant mind and exposes the empty heart. Verse 2, laugh that I said is foolish, and what does pleasure accomplish? Folks, we are in that muddle. And then how many suppose that fulfillment is found in the pleasure of hobbies? From the pub to the projects, from the park to the platform. Verse 3, I tried cheating myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. Verse 9, I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. You notice the phrases, I undertook, I built, I made, I planted, I became. Busy, busy, busy. From the pub to the projects, from the park to the platform. How many find and suppose that they're going to find fulfillment in the pleasure of hobbies? Every funeral has its own trouble and sorrow. But I don't know about you, but I find it absolutely devastating when all that can be said about the deceased as we stand round their coffin is the likes of, he loved the horses. She was always at the bingo. He loved to fish. She loved to knit. How they loved their drink. How's that for being remembered? Measured by a pint. Known for where you sat, not what you stood for. Wasting the time away in what does not matter because in itself, by itself, of itself, it's nothing. Listen to this wise observation. Entertainment serves a useful purpose as an occasional diversion from the serious tasks of life, but happiness is not found in diversion. How many suppose that fulfillment is found in the pleasure of hobbies? How many are in that muddle? And then how many think that the answer is found in the pleasure of what they have and hoard? Verse 7. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also own more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of man. Here's the phrases again. I bought. I owned. I amassed. I acquired. How many think the answer is found in the pleasure of what they have and hoard? The newest, the loudest, the first, the shiniest, the biggest, the best, the most. From the people they court, to the possessions they boast, from the places they live, to the prominence they enjoy. You know what we call it, don't we? We call it the rat race. And how true. The trouble with the rat race is that even if you win, you're still a rat. The rat race. Hear it. See it. There's a flaw in all this. Something is missing. It's out of place. It's a muddle, don't you think? To quote Tanya Gold, Designer clothes don't make you beautiful. High heels are painful and can be fatal. Humor, hobbies, hoarding. How many have travelled that road only to find that hedonism, pleasure for pleasure's sake, no matter the cost, at all costs, as the defining and deciding factors of our lives, only to find that hedonism is not the key to happiness. It's the recipe for heartbreak. Verse 10, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart all pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labour. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Getting over the muddle of unrestrained pleasure. It's been said that man is better than an animal because he can live a thoughtful life. And here the preacher begins to share his thinking. I call it the muddle of unrelieved philosophy. The muddle of unrelieved philosophy. Verse 12. Then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise man has eyes in his head, while the fool walks in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I thought in my heart, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said in my heart, this too is meaningless, for the wise man like the fool will not be long remembered. In days to come both will be forgotten. Like the fool, the wise man too must die. Don't you think what a miserable conclusion to reach? But while there are obvious advantages to being wise over being foolish, as there is between light and darkness, ultimately the end of the wise is no better than the fate of the fool, because it's no different. Like the fool, the wise man too must die. Folks, that thinking is wrong thinking, because it's flawed thinking. And get this, where hedonism saw human happiness as the centre and standard, philosophy sees human thinking as the centre and standard. And we call it humanism. Get that? Philosophy sees that human thinking is the centre and the standard. Humanism. Thoughts and convictions, creeds and conclusions, which start with self, continue with self, end with self, and when we seek to stand there, we find it is not the middle, it's the muddle. Humanism. And get this, in the church, when there is only a social element, even a social element we call worship, when there is only a social element in the church, but there is no spiritual dimension fueled by a supernatural dynamic that can be humanly experienced but not humanly explained, then we are nothing more than religious humanists. Because it starts and stops with us. Self is the centre. Thoughts and convictions, creeds and conclusions, which start with self, continue with self, end with self, and when we seek to stand there, we find it's not the middle, it's the muddle. We need to get over the muddle of unbelief philosophy. A scientist was using the inductive method, it's called, the reasoning method, to observe the characteristics of a flea. Plucking a leg off the flea, he ordered, jump, and the flea promptly jumped. He took another leg off, and the scientist again commanded, jump, and the flea jumped again. The scientist continued this process until he came to the sixth and final leg. By now the flea was having a little more difficulty jumping, but he was still trying. The scientist pulled the final leg off and again ordered the flea to jump, but the flea didn't respond. So the scientist raised his voice and demanded, jump! And again the flea failed to respond. And for a third time the scientist shouted at the top of his lungs, jump! But the helpless flea lay motionless. The scientist then made the following observation in his notebook. He said, when you remove the legs from a flea, it loses its sense of hearing. Hear it. How many muddled conclusions and their miserable consequences have been reached by the same clouded reasoning? Humanism. Thoughts and convictions, creeds and conclusions, which start with self, continue with self, end with self, and when we seek to stand there, we find it's not the middle, but the muddle. We see a great example of this in the words of journey you take is through yourself. The only sustaining love involvement is with yourself. When you look back on your life and try to figure out where you've been and where you're going, when you look at your work, your love affairs, your marriages, your children, your pain, your happiness, when you examine all that closely, what you really find out is that the only person you really go to bed with is yourself. The only thing you have is working to the consummation of your own identity, and that's what I've been trying to do all my life. There's a wonderful Greek word for that. Baloney. I mean, folks, what kind of muddled reasoning is that? That the source of the question is in fact the source of the answer. I, me, mine, myself. Francis Schaeffer wrote of the death wish inherent in humanism. He said, humanism has no way to find the universal in the areas of meaning and values. Humanism has changed the 23rd Psalm. They began, I am my shepherd. Then, sheep are my shepherd. Then, everything is my shepherd. Finally, nothing is my shepherd. There's a death wish inherent in humanism. The same muddled, miserable end as noted here in Ecclesiastes 2:15. The fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said in my heart, this too is meaningless. For the wise man, like the fool, will not be long remembered. In days to come, both will be forgotten. Like the fool, the wise man, too, must die. Folks, there's a flaw in this. Something is missing. It's out of place. It's a muddle, don't you think? How many have thought that William Ernest Henley's Invictus to be so clever? To be the middle. You may recall the words, out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced or cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horrors of the shade. And yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. I say, big whoop. Not. There's no relief there. Because there's no answer. Because according to that, like the fool, the wise man too must die. As one Bible commentator put it, of this section in Ecclesiastes 2, here the sandy foundation of all humanism becomes apparent. We need to get over the muddle of unbelief philosophy, and then we need to get over the muddle of unrewarded prospects. Verse 17. So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool, yet he will have control over all the work into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labour under the sun. For a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all he owns to someone who has not worked for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What does a man get for all the toil and anxious striving with which he labours under the sun? All his days his work is pain and grief. Even at night his mind does not rest. This too is meaningless. We need to get over the muddle of unrewarded prospects, and what we're reading here is a hypothesis, and let me define hypothesis. A hypothesis is an unproved argument. It's a position without any foundation, a hypothesis. And such is a hypothesis that leads us into all kinds of isms. And an ism is a dangerous and pointless extreme. We need to get over the muddle of unrewarded prospects. Please hear this. The problem is not the place of work. Work has its place. God works. Did you know that God works? The Bible tells us in Genesis 2 and 2, by the seventh day God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the seventh day he rested from all his work. In the flesh, Jesus worked, learning the trade of his earthly father. Why else would those he grew up with in Nazareth say of him in Mark 6, 2 and 3, where did this man get these things? What's this wisdom that has been given him that he even does miracles? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son? Isn't this the carpenter? Work has its place. The problem is not the place of work. Consider these reflections. Some students think manual labor is the president of Mexico. Until they graduate. Suddenly the light dawns, reality frowns, and that sheltered, brainy, fair-skinned, squint-eyed scholar who has majored in medieval literature and minored in Latin comes of age. He experiences a strange sensation deep within his abdomen 2 weeks after framing his diploma. Hunger. Remarkable motivation accompanies this feeling. His attempts at finding employment prove futile. Those places that have an opening don't really need a fellow with a master's in medieval lit. They can't even spell it. Who cares if a truck driver understands European poetry from the 12th century? Or what does it matter if the fellow stocking the shelves at Safeway can give you the 9th letter in the Latin alphabet? When it comes to landing a job, most employers are notoriously pragmatic and unsophisticated. They are looking for people who have more than academic grey wrinkles between their ears. They really couldn't care less about how much a fella or girl knows. What they want is someone who can put to use the knowledge that's been gained. Whether the field is geology or accounting, engineering or plumbing, physics or barbering, journalism or welding. Just now finishing school, looking for a job, remember this. Dreams are great and visions are fun, but in the final analysis, when the bills come due, they'll be paid by manual labor. Labor, hard work forged in the furnace of practicality. Work has its place. The problem is not the place of work. The problem is the pace of work. The pace of work. Go back please to Genesis chapter 2, will you? Genesis 2 and verse 15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You're free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die." The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Go into chapter 3 of Genesis 3 and verse 17. To Adam, God said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, and since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return." How true, as the preacher has already pointed out in Ecclesiastes 1:13, what a heavy burden God has laid on man. And what is the burden? Work becomes toil. There's a difference. Work becomes toil. No product. For what? No purpose. For when? No promise. For who? Folks, no wonder we sweat. Work becomes toil. I wonder how many you know have come to the same hard place, even halting place, as this man. Listen to what he says. "I am 42 years old. I work for a large corporation, but I'm no longer moving up. I know that working for a large corporation is not exactly the in thing, but my father owned a small retail store, and after 30 years of his standing behind the counter, neither of us saw the magic of doing your own thing. But a big corporation, something plucked right off the Fortune 500, a company with interlocking multinational profit centres, with well-defined vertical and horizontal reporting relationships. That was just what the doctor ordered, and that was exactly what I got. Going in, I knew there would be a price to pay. Too much structure can be confining, but for me, the organisational chart was like a children's playground, a place to climb, swing and scramble all the way to the top. And that was where I was headed. After all, isn't that what it's all about? Year by year, level by level, I made my way up. If I wasn't laughing all the way, only rarely did I doubt choosing the corporate life. Never being one for team sports, never having served in the army, I enjoyed the camaraderie that comes with being one of the boys. I also enjoyed the competition. Whatever the reason, I was immediately perceived to be a star. And though my corporation was too conservative to have a fast track, I did burn a few cinders as a steady procession of blue memos charted my upward progress. Over the years I gained titles, windows, salary and perks. These incentives fueled the fire that was burning very bright indeed. I knew in my bones that I would someday reach the top. Some men might stumble, others might even fall by the wayside, but not me, never me, or so I believed, right up to the day, right up to the instant when I learned the fire was out, the star was extinguished, the climb was over. I could expect the average salary increases due the average employee, but there would be no more leapfrog advancements, no more seductive little perks, no more blue memos. I was no longer climbing, I had plateaued out. Unrewarded prospects, for what? For when? For who? In 1843, Thomas Hood penned the Song of the Shirt. It was about a seamstress he knew, Mrs. Biddle, who had to pay, get this, she had to pay a £2 deposit on the material for the shirt she had sold. She would then pawn the clothing she'd made, thus caught in a cycle of debts she'd never pay off. The toil would never end. Do you understand? She was not being paid to work. She was paying to work. Let me read you two verses from what Hood wrote of her. With fingers weary and worn, with eyelids heavy and red, a woman sat in unwomanly rags, plying her needle and thread. Stitch, 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 in poverty, hunger and dirt, and still with a voice of dolorous pitch, she sang the song of the shirt. O men with sisters dear, O men with mothers and wives, it's not linen you're wearing out, but human creatures' lives. Stitch, 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 in poverty, hunger and dirt, sewing at once with a double thread, a shroud as well as a shirt. Penned in 1843, but how many still sweat to the song of the shirt in 2012? For what? For when? For who? Unrewarded prospects, not being paid to work so much as paying to work. All his days, his work is pain and grief. Even at night, his mind does not rest. This too is meaningless. What a muddled hypothesis, taking us to every ism we could imagine. Folks, there's a flaw in this. There's something missing, out of place. It's a muddle. What do you think? Getting over it then, from the muddle to the middle. And remember what we said out right at the beginning tonight. The muddle is a messy place of chaos and confusion, of disorder leading to disaster. We've seen that. The middle is a safer and better place, because to find the middle is to be rightly centered. The middle in this context is not about compromise. It's about constancy. It's a place of balance, and it leads to because it allows balance and boundary and blessing. Verse 24. A man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. Stop and think. Unless I've missed it, in the 24 verses up to here, so far in this second chapter, this is the first mention of God. And that's our problem. That's our flaw. That is our muddle. Hear it. There is nothing wrong with seeking pleasure. If you go away and say, the pastor said we're not to enjoy it, you've missed the middle. You're in the muddle. There's nothing wrong with seeking seeking pleasure. What is wrong is the seeking of pleasure without God. Hedonism. It's no balance. And that's the flaw. No balance to our pleasure, for we are not the middle. And there's nothing wrong with thinking and reasoning. But get this, what truth is there in a thinking that omits God? That never even considers God? That's not an open mind. That's not an honest quest when you're omitting and you're not considering. That's the flaw. No balance to our philosophies because we are not the middle. And there's nothing wrong with good work and hard work and honest work. It's not wrong to be concerned for what is in the future, for who is to come after, to be troubled by wasted effort and an inheritance devalued by others because it came to them by your own effort and cost and at no effort or cost to them, and so there's no appreciation of it and there's no value to it. Look at verse 18. I hated all the things I toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me, and who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool, yet he will have control over all the work into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. You see, that's the flaw of our work. Toil only and ever and always under the sun with no sense of God. And thus and again, no balance to our prospects because it's all under the sun where we suppose we are in the middle. Just turn for a moment to a parable Jesus tells in Luke 12. And it parallels Ecclesiastes 2, really. Luke 12. Luke 12 and verse 16. Jesus says, the ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. Then I'll say to myself, you've plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then you will get what you have prepared for yourself. This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich towards God. You see, like the progression of Ecclesiastes 2 up until verse 24, so here, there's no mention of God, there's no thought of God, there's no place for God with this man. Look what he says. What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns, and there I will store all my grain and my goods, and I'll say to myself, no mention of God, no thought of God, no place for God. I, like we've seen in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, I built, I planted, I made, I bought, I owned, I amassed, I acquired, I became. Self-supposed and set in the middle, no balance. And how many listening and watching are just like him. A man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. That is balance. Getting over it from the muddle to the middle. Verse 25 back in Ecclesiastes 2. For without God, who can eat or find enjoyment? Now get this. We need balance. But not only do we need balance, we need boundaries. Because boundaries maintain the balance. For if we stray too far from the right centre to the extreme of any ism, we lose the balance, and so there are boundaries to keep us balanced. Without God, who can eat or find enjoyment? Note that phrase, without God. How many have forsaken and forgotten and forfeited the boundaries of God, and thus they live without God? In the United States, a schoolboy wrote this in his exam paper. He said, the pilgrims came here seeking freedom from you-know-what, landed and gave thanks to you-know-who. Now we can worship on Sundays you-know-where. No boundaries. Just endless wandering, limitless ignorance, pointless, aimless rambling. That's what people think that they do these days. That we just make God whatever we want him to be, and we just, everything, anything goes. It's just how we want it to be. Meaningless and chasing after the wind, nothing gained under the sun without God. Turn to what the Bible tells us in 1 Timothy 6. 1 Timothy 6. And verse 6. 1 Timothy 6:6. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. People who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Verse 17. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. What is Ecclesiastes 2, verses 1 to 23, but the miserable record of the trouble of storing up too much on earth under the sun, and not in heaven with God over eternal things. 1 Timothy 6:19. In this way they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life above the sun. And please get this. See the boundary? The boundary is not as restrictive as many suppose, and as the enemy of your soul will deceptively whisper to you. Look again at 1 Timothy 6, verse 17. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Just like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, so many people, even most people, don't even know that the word enjoyment is even in the Bible. As a positive, freeing command of provision, not a restrictive boundary, but a protective boundary. The boundary is not as restrictive as many suppose, and as the enemy of your soul will deceptively whisper to you. Listen to what Jane Cranfield wrote. She said, "The happiest people are rarely the richest, or the most beautiful, or even the most talented. Happy people do not depend on excitement and fun supplied by externals. They enjoy the fundamental, often very simple things of life. They waste no time thinking other pastures are greenner. They do not yearn for yesterday or tomorrow. They savor the moment, glad to be alive, enjoying their work, their families, the good things around them. They are adaptable. They can bend with the wind, adjust to the changes in their times, enjoy the contests of life, and feel themselves in harmony with the world. Their eyes are turned outward. They are aware, compassionate. They have the capacity to love, and that is the blessing of it all." Back in Ecclesiastes 2, verse 26, "To the man who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind." The blessing. One more reference. Turn to James, please, will you? James chapter 1. James chapter 1, verse 16. "Don't be deceived, my dear brothers." Please don't be deceived. "Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting sand or shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of firstfruits of all he created." Blessed. The very same as what the preacher is declaring in verse 26 of Ecclesiastes 2, "To the man who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind." Before we pray, hear what I say. You can choose to limit life to your very own mirror under the sun. But there's a way over that. We don't need to stay in the muddle. You can get to the middle. Who would want to live in the muddle and not the middle? Who would want to live without God? Who would want to omit God and and resist God and refuse God, this too is meaningless. Chasing after the wind. Close your Bibles, will you please? We live in a world where every day discoveries are being made and breakthroughs heralded. I don't know if you've ever come across them. The lists are all over the place. There's more than one data list, of things we know today that we never knew even just yesterday. Listen to what a scientist, a modern-day scientist, his name is Dr. Charles Steinmetz. Listen to what he says. I think the greatest discovery will be along spiritual lines. Here is a force which history clearly teaches has been the greatest power in the development of man in history. Yet we have been merely playing with it and never seriously studied it as we have the social forces. Someday people will learn that material things do not bring happiness and are of little use in making men creative. Then the scientists of the world will turn their laboratories over to the study of God and prayer and the spiritual forces, which as yet have been hardly scratched. When this day comes, the world will advance more in one generation than it has in the past 4 generations. Sir James Simpson, the famous Edinburgh chemist, the one who discovered chloroform, he was asked towards the end of his remarkable career what was his greatest discovery. And he said this, "My greatest discovery was when I discovered what Jesus Christ would be to me. My Saviour, my Lord, my Master." Heaven, getting above just being under the sun. He moved